Hello, and thank you very much for taking this Apps Book Selling University course about how to make a persuasive sales presentation. My name is Brian Judd, and I will be the speaker of this particular course. And just a little background on me is that I am the executive director of Apps, but I've had a lot of experience in selling and making sales presentations as the VP of marketing for a Fortune 250 company. I was a sales trainer for Xerox years ago. I've written a lot of books on book marketing and particularly on special sales marketing, which involves a lot of personal presentations. So I'll be talking about some of the experiences I've had and others have had in selling books, but this information can apply to a variety of different aspects of your life. For example, what to expect in this course, actually how to prepare for sales presentations. But you can think about these presentations as you might perhaps in a TV performance or a radio show, if you're doing that promoting your book, or maybe even getting a job interview. A lot of these techniques will benefit you in a variety of situations, but we'll focus on the sales presentation during this course. And you can just sit back and think about how you can apply that to other parts of your life too, but particularly about selling books. We'll talk about how to create your content, which is the verbal part of your presentation, the words that you use, and how to deliver those words both vocally and visually. That's our objective, and our focus will be on making large quantity sales to particularly non-retail buyers. But you can make a sales presentation to a distributor, to a publisher, or to the producer of a TV and radio show. I think you'll find these techniques will help you during a variety of different situations. So where do presentations fit in the sales process? So let's look at the special sales process this for our presentation purposes. One, you have to understand special sales. We have various courses on these particular topics, defining and segmenting your target buyers. And the first area is retail. If you decide to contact airport stores or supermarkets or other types of retailers that are non-bookstore, then you have to make a presentation to your distributor and maybe even to the retail buyer. So these these principles we're talking about will help you do that too. So then you have to promote and follow up, certainly. Then you prospect for more buyers. So the more you're contacting more retail buyers, which may require different distribution. And again, it may require a different distributor for that. The non-retail part could be the corporations or associations or schools. I think you'll find most of these techniques will be applicable in this situation. And then you have the initial meeting where you call on the buyer. And we have a BSU course on that, about how to make the appointment, how to prospect for buyers. But you might make a very impromptu, perhaps informal sales presentation there. So it's good to have practiced a variety of these so you can pick upon different words to use and different handouts, different AV and so forth. But you may actually get the order there. So then you promote and follow up with that person and you place the order. And then you go out and prospect for more buyers and make more of these initial presentations to your buyers. And then you have to write a proposal. A proposal is a recommendation that you propose to that particular client or prospect. And that is your recommendation, how you suggest your books be used. And that's where you make the primary sales presentation. And then you negotiate the sale. But you can see where the techniques we'll be talking about today fit into the process. Here where you're creating your distribution, you're contacting the distributors and the retail buyers and different distributors. And you make your initial meeting, it's certainly going to take place there, and your sales presentation here, and your techniques of interaction, of dealing with your customers and prospects will also take place here. So there are a variety of different situations in which you can use the techniques we'll be talking about here. So what are the objectives of a presentation? Well, it could be to show you understand the prospect's business, which is really important because, as we'll see momentarily, the prospect has a variety of different questions about you. If they've never worked with you before, certainly they're wondering if you can deliver on your promise, if they can trust you. These are some things that, but you also have to understand the prospect's business, that you know what their industry is like, their competition, and so then you present your proposal as the best alternative to solve any problems that they have. Then you want to form positive and sincere relationships, because in this type of selling, in corporate sales, for example, you can come back and get recurring business, you can get future orders, and that will occur if they trust you, if they have a relationship with you. And I'll talk about a few of these things. Well, we'll talk about all these things shortly. That you have the need to create value and that have that mutual satisfaction. That means that a corporate sale is a win-win situation where you have the prospect gets to solve their problems, you get the sales certainly, and their customers are satisfied, so they buy more of the prospect's products, which may be their objective. So it's not a they win I lose or I win they lose situation. You need to create that mutual win-win, mutual satisfaction. You certainly have to meet your objectives. You can't just bow down to whatever they say. But it gets to difficult. It could be difficult in the sense of when the prospect may be waving a $50,000 check in front of you, made out to you, and said, "Can you deliver these 4-color books in 4 weeks in these 4 different locations?" And you're not sure if you can do it or not, but that $50,000 check looks good, so you take it. That's not going to meet your objectives. If there's a win-win situation, you've got to be able to know when to turn down an order or to negotiate a different terms so you can meet your objectives and certainly satisfy those of the buyer too. Then you have to show how you can meet their criteria. And here's some examples of the customer's criteria. Where you have, say, you're talking to a marketing manager. This person's objective or criteria may be to increase sales or to enter a new market or to introduce a new product. And they're trying to find a product that they can use as a promotional item. They've already used umbrellas and coffee mugs and keychains, so they're looking for something else. And they invite you in to find out what you can offer. But in the back of their mind, until you've created some trust or some mutual understanding, they've got these questions, or they're thinking, "I've never heard of you or your book. So you got to prove something, convince me about why you're the best person." They may never have used a book as a promo item. They've used their coffee mugs and umbrellas before, but never a book. So you may have to start out just talking about that. So that's why it's important when you start the conversation. The first thing you may do is ask some questions and to find out what their reservations are, why they want to look for a new product, and how you can help them do that. So demonstrate that you know about their company, about their industry, and that you are in fact a credible source of information. Because until you do that, then they have that question in the back of their mind. They're almost like a challenge. Now, what is it you want to sell me? And you've got to be able to let them know you understand their concerns and what they want to accomplish. But it also may occur, say you're talking to an HR manager, and that person's job is to make their employees more productive, maybe increase morale, maybe increase productivity, whatever that may be. They still haven't heard of you. This is your first call on them. They've never heard of you or your book. And see, they're worried about their employees. Will they understand it? Will they be able to do it? Will they be able to internalize it? Are you that credible source? So you've got these different types of concerns. That's why it's so important to do some background research, which we'll talk about momentarily. So you have to think about, as an example here, if say you have a book on walking, which we had for one of our clients, and the HR manager's objective was to decrease absenteeism and increase productivity and to reduce healthcare costs. So they had 10,000 employees. So we had this book on walking, and we created what is called a continuity program, where each month the recipients get a different item. So month 1, each of the 10,000 employees got a book on walking. Month 2, a pedometer. Month 3, they got a journal to keep track of their exercise. And then they hired the author as a spokesman to travel around the country to talk about the benefits of a healthy lifestyle. So what was good about this is that they reached their objectives, and we sold a lot of books, and everybody was happy. So that's the win-win concept. Now there are three parts to every sales presentation. There's the preparation, so you find the answers to what all these concerns that they have, or you bring out the concerns so you can address them. There's content and delivery. So it's the preparation, then coming up with the words that you'll use for each individual prospect, and then the delivery, how you do that vocally and visually. Now, the preparation can be for a variety of different prospects of doing your script and doing your proposal. You have outlines for that, but the content, the words that you'll use, will be different for each of the different prospects. If you're calling on somebody in healthcare versus somebody in banking versus somebody in insurance, they have different concerns, different problems that they want to address, and so you have to demonstrate to them that you understand it. So the content will be different. The delivery, all the axioms we'll talk about are similar as far as your vocal and visual, but the actual AV, for example, that you use may be different for each situation. So you have to do your homework. And the preparation stage is what you're doing here. You're doing the homework. You're getting the information that you need to convince this particular buyer that your product is the best. Now, think about this. If you're going on a TV or radio show too, you have to do the same thing. You have to do the preparation, work on the words that you'll use, and practice the vocal and visual delivery. So whether you're working for a sales presentation or for an appearance on a TV show or a radio show, you have to do your homework. You have to know yourself. Are you a good presenter? Do you get nervous, or do you not like selling? Well, in that case, maybe you want to get somebody else to go with you on a presentation, or a contract with a sales rep or a sales agent to do all this for you. So you don't have to get involved with it at all, but you can still use these techniques for your TV and radio shows. And know your audience. You have to know that background. Have they used books as sales promotional items before? Well, that's the knowledge you have to have. So when they ask you about the fact of what do you know about my company, what do you know about your products, then about my products, and you can let them know that you are familiar with them. Know the location and the layout. That for one time I was the marketing manager of a company, and I remember that one time I was trying to get a new customer, and this buyer was going to be in New Orleans airport the same time I was going to be. And we both had layovers there. So we decided to have a beer and meet and talk. So I had an audio visual sample of the product that it was a non-woven material for surgical gowns. And it was flame retardant. So he wanted to see how flame retardant it was. And he picked up the sample material that I had and took a lighter out and lit it, and the thing burst in flames. So he dropped it in the ashtray. We poured our beer on it and put it out. And it may sound like it was a disaster, but it was something he was a good guy. We just laughed about it, and I said, I better check out the flame retardancy. We actually became good friends after that, and a good customer and good friends. So I knew the location was going to be in an airport bar, and it's something that I had prepared for that. But if you know you're going to be in a conference room, or I gave presentations on a sailboat, so if you know where you're going to be. I certainly didn't use a PowerPoint presentation on the sailboat, but I knew where it would be and what I would be going over. I knew what I was going to say, and I created my strategy. So it wasn't just an off-the-cuff thing. I knew I was going to try to get his cooperation and get an order for the sale, which is your ultimate objective, but it may take 2 or 3 different sales calls to make that happen. One thing you'll experience, hopefully you don't, but you probably will. You're working on a large sale, and you've done 3 or 4 presentations. You got the person that your buyer says, okay, stop in next week and I'll sign the order. So you come there next week and, Brian, I've got some great news for you. I just got promoted, and here's my replacement. While you're being happy for your ally, your friend in the business, that you you have to start all over again. So what has just become a 6-month process, you're starting again. That may happen. The budget may be cut. Things that will happen. So your strategy has to be a little bit, have it in place, but be a little bit flexible. I think you'll find flexibility is a very important thing in this business. So it's really good to have a script, and it doesn't mean that you rehearse a script and memorize and give it to everybody. It's not what I mean. What I mean by a script is that you have some organization to your presentation where you know you're going to start out getting attention, then you're going to bring up points 1, 2, and 3, and then you're going to ask for a commitment at the end. Excuse me. So you have those steps in place, but they could change. They will change for each sale. The way that you get attention may be different. The 3 points you bring up will certainly be different. And the way that you ask for the order may be different also, or the size of the order, the terms, whatever, that would be different. But the script gives you some organization. I remember early in my career, I was a sales rep for Xerox, and this was back in the copier division. And we had to memorize a script for one of the copiers. And before we could actually start on our territory, we had to give that presentation to the sales manager word for word with no mistakes. It took several times, and I was wondering why go through all this. And it's just memorizing. I'm never going to give a memorized pitch to anybody. But eventually, it gave me some security because at different times my mind went blank. I didn't know what I was going to say. I just forgot, and I was able to go back to different points in that script that I had memorized, and just it brought me back, gave me that secure feeling that once I was able to bring up another point, then eventually everything came back to me, and I was able to proceed. So that it gave me some consistency also on different people that different buyers. I have the major points I want to bring up. I want to bring up the the problem they have and my solution to that problem and my plan to implement that. So it has that consistency, that when you have consistency, it helps give you momentum. You get on a roll. You get in the zone. And that when you get you just feel right because everything is going along as you planned it. So a script gives you that security and consistency and momentum. And it also can help you eliminate or reduce, I should say, nervousness. You never want to eliminate nervousness, as I'll talk a little bit before. We'll talk soon and describe that. So there are some organization tips that could be helpful when you're organizing your script. You can do that in several ways. One is chronology. If there is a sequence of events that we have to get the order signed, then we have to make sure we get everything printed, get your logo on the cover, have the books delivered where you want them, when you want them, and here's the timeline that will occur. So your script may be designed chronologically, or it could be a narrative. Might be a story about something you did for a different client. And we have a company, for example, that created the products for chemotherapy and treating cancer. We had a book about how to eat well through cancer. And the chemotherapy, the manufacturer of the products bought 30,000 or more than 30,000 copies of this book and gave them to the doctors, and the doctors gave them to the patients. So that's just a little narrative story about how a book could be used as a premium. So if a company has never used a book as a premium before, then they have an idea about how it could be used. The enumerative organization tips. A customer may say, what are the 3 most important reasons why I should go with your proposal? Well, here's number 1, here's number 2, here's number 3. So you see in the next slide how important that is to have at least 3 different major points that you want to enumerate. And that could be in any presentation that you want to get across at least 3 major points. Your prospect may be looking to launch this campaign geographically. Maybe they're starting in the Northwest first, and then Southwest, and then Midwest, and then Northeast and Southeast. So your script, your proposal will outline how you can have the books delivered in these different places and have backups. And here's how long it would take if you need to get a reprint, it would take this long. So when it gets down, the inventory gets down to this level, we'll have to order more books. You have to make sure that they're shipped in time to the Northwest because our printer's in Michigan, something like that. So if you have all this geographical information, you're organizing your script these ways. So it just gives you, again, some security that you have all these facts in place. Now, here's how if you decide you want to have a chronological type of a presentation, well, here are some ways to organize your presentation. First, you have an introduction. You want to capture the audience attention, certainly. And I'll talk briefly, momentarily, about each one of these. But you want to get the audience's attention, and because when they sit, you may have not met these people. Your ally has created this opportunity for you to make the presentation to the marketing manager, to the purchasing agent, to the warehouse manager, and they have no idea who you are. That they come in, they sit down, and your ally introduces you. Your ally is the person who you first spoke to, who is introducing your concept to the organization. So the people sit down and they're looking at you, sizing you up, thinking, well, or maybe you have 2 people there or 3 people, and they're looking at, what am I in for now? How long is this going to take? Why is this going to be important to me? So you need to get their attention in a positive way quickly. Then you want to make 3 main points in your the body of your presentation. Don't make more than that, because they're not going to remember it. And if you do it right, main point 1, you'll have a sub point, some support material, and you'll say, does that make sense? Did I get that across appropriately? Do you need more information? I say, no, I understand. It's okay. Let's go to my second point. Then you do the same thing. You give that, you give your support, and then you confirm that they understand what you're saying. That's really important to do that, because at the end, when you're doing a summary before you close, you are referring back to this. Well, we all agreed on point number 1, we agreed on point number 2, we agreed on point number 3. So let's conclude that. And you review that, you summarize your agreement to the 3 different points, and then you decide you create the call to action. So how do you get attention quickly? There's a few different ways. One, coming up with a startling question. You may say, what's the best thing that could happen if we implement this campaign correctly? What's the worst thing that can happen? Well, you probably want to keep it positive. So ask what's the best that could happen. The worst thing that could happen, it could be a startling question, but the best thing, you want to get them started talking in a positive way. See, the presentation, you don't have to be the expert in presenting, because a presentation in many cases is just a discussion. You ask questions and get the involvement of people, then it becomes a discussion where they're asking questions of you and you're asking questions of them, and then you're talking about how to answer these, and it can be a fun event once you get used to doing a few of them. So don't be concerned that you're not the professional sales presenter when it doesn't always require that skill. So you may have an appropriate quotation, which could be maybe a testimonial from a previous customer, and try to use one that's a non-competitive one from a different industry. If you have that, if you have some examples, because you don't want to have them thinking that you're working with a competitor, because they want to make sure that their information about their new product introduction is certainly confidential. And that's one thing you really need to demonstrate and let them know about the confidentiality. Whatever you talk about during your presentation is certainly confidential. Have some kind of an object or a picture. Certainly your book is a good object to have and demonstrate that. Or you might have if your book is about model cars or model trains, well, maybe have an actual model there. Or if if their product is a soap and your book is about soap, and you can have an example of both those there. And it's just it's something that not distracts attention, but focuses attention on something other than you if you're nervous about it. But it also enhances the visual nature of that, enhances what you're saying. You can have that test or question. That's what's what was your last promotion like? Something like that. What went right? What went wrong? What went right? What would you change? So you have that question. You don't want to make it as a challenge, but make it as a way to get involvement. And have a pertinent news item. And I live in Hartford, Connecticut, and when I was marketing my job search books, I would drive up to Albany every Friday. I was their job search expert on the noon news. And I would get there early and get a copy of the Albany newspaper and go through it to find out some pertinent news items that I could bring up during my. I only had 2 minutes on the air, and so I had to say, well, like in this morning's paper, this company was laying off these people. This company was hiring new people. So you can use that information to quickly get attention because they know that it's something that is pertinent to them. Then you may talk about your products, your content, and we'll be talking about content, not about your physical book, but about the content, the benefits that your content brings to the individual. So that's something that you start off certainly in a very positive way, and say, here's how this information in my book that can help you launch your new product in this particular area. And so then you go off in your geographical presentation. But you've got their attention because you would say that you're leading into the fact that you can, in fact, solve their problem. There are also things you want to avoid when you're just starting out your presentation. Don't start out with an apologetic statement in the sense that you may have been late. It's happened to me. But you don't say, "Oh, I'm really sorry I'm late. I know I've used up some of your time," and that just puts you on the negative side, on the defense. You may just want to say, "Well, we're getting started a little bit late here, so let's just jump right into it." So that you're not apologizing, but you're certainly acknowledging the fact that you're late without taking blame for it. Jokes are tough to start off with because even if it's related to your topic, it's got to be short and quick and have some kind of a punchline, but not something that if you tell a joke and you look out after you reach the punchline, there are all these stony faces there with not a crack of a smile. It can cause some nervousness, and certainly that you talk to somebody who's done a lot of these presentations, they'll admit the fact that they tried it once or tried it twice and it just didn't go over well. So a story that does relate to your proposal can work, but a joke with a punchline, you may offer some humorous comments that don't require a punchline, but something that may break the ice a little bit. That could be okay. Some commonplace observations that you don't want to say, well, everybody's doing this. That's just something that doesn't make any sense. You want to be specific when you're making an observation. When you're bringing in an example or something, it's not what everybody's doing. It's what you can do in your situation. And don't start off with some long, slow-moving statement or story that just gets people bored. Because again, they're when they first sat down, they're thinking, what's this person got to offer me? How long is this going to take? What's in it for me? The WIIFM. Everybody's listening to that radio station, WIIFM. What's in it for me? And if you take too long and giving them some inkling of why they benefit, then their mind goes off into, as soon as this meeting's over, I've got a phone call I've got to make, or that this client's waiting for me to return the call. I've got to get back there soon. And they're not listening to you. So be clear, specific. We'll talk about this momentarily. Just concisely get started with that startling, with the ways of getting attention in a positive way. Now create the body of your presentation. The problem solution is a good way to do that. Excuse me. And that will change every presentation. Here's the problem that they have, that sales are down. So they're thinking, why are sales down? How can we turn around our sales situation? And you're coming up with different kinds of solutions. Well, maybe it's not the product, or maybe it's the timing, maybe it's the wrong audience, the wrong segment. And here's how your content can be used to address this new segment. So the problem of their low sales is solved by your recommendation. The experience could be just a case history format, that narrative type of a format where you are describing how you've worked with a company similar and with a similar problem, and you in fact solved it. The issues could be that for HR manager, that their absenteeism is high. They want to reduce that, and their productivity is low. So your presentation brings up 3 points about how your content can, in fact, uh, address this situation and help decrease the absenteeism by showing people how a healthier lifestyle can make them more productive and more and healthier. Certainly, the opinions of people that maybe they have never used books before as a sales promotion or a premium. So that's you may start off talking about how a book could be used as a premium, as a sales promotional item. It could be perhaps a gift with purchase or a premium or an ad specialty or maybe a coupon if you're trying to sell dog food. You have an ebook on dog care. Well, maybe you put a coupon in the bag or on the bag of 20-pound bag of dog food. So they get people who buy that get a free ebook on dog care. So their opinion on how to use it, that maybe the books cannot be used as a premium, are quickly dissolved because you've demonstrated how it could be for their particular situation. And it may be the people involved, maybe talking about the employees or about the customers or about the sales reps, whoever the people are involved in implementing your proposal. Well, then you talk about them and how that your content can in fact be utilized by them in a productive way to reach the objectives of the decision maker. Different places, that would be the geographical type presentation where you're talking about the geographic implementation. It may be an international setting. It may be we had a chain of children's shoe stores in the Southwest, and we created a program with them that when the parents bought a certain amount of dollars worth of children's shoes, that they got a card punched. And when they had the card punched, 4 different punches, the kids got to choose a book from our catalog program. It could have been a printed book or an e-book, whatever. It was just the idea that it took place in the Southwest, and it was an example of how it could occur. The timing, the sequence, and more of the chronological type of a presentation. The cause and effect certainly is like an if-then situation. You might remember that from our old algebra days, that you have the cause. Here's what caused this, what we suggest the cause be. Here's what the effect would be. Would the increase in sales or decrease in productivity, whatever that may be. At any rate, you can create the body of your presentation in a variety of different ways. But then regardless of which one you choose, you've got to practice it. And you may have heard the concept that practice makes perfect. Well, it doesn't. That doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. And if you're practicing the wrong things, then you get the bad results. So if you have to make sure you're practicing the right things. So practice your gestures and your movements. And first of all, you have to know what makes a good gesture and movement. I was the host of a television show for 13 years, and early on, I thought I knew everything about how to be a good host, and I was gesturing and moving. Then I took some media training and realized the unconscious incompetent or whatever it is, that I didn't realize how much I didn't know. So I took this media training and continued that, and learned how to make the proper gestures and movements of facial expression and arm movements and hand movements and head gestures and whatever that may be to impact or increase the impact of what I was saying verbally. You certainly want to look at practice the timing of your AV and of your movements, and asking what kind of questions will you ask and answer, and you anticipate those. And I like the term question instead of objection. If somebody says, "How much does your book cost?" Well, that's a question. If they say, "Well, that's too much," then that becomes an objection. So but be able to respond appropriately to either way. Then you practice your audio and visual aids and the timing of those, and how your gestures will can be impacted, or how your gestures can impact the audio visual aids, or vice versa. And we'll talk more about AV later in this course. And practice helps improve your confidence. It gives you that confidence, because that when you get in a situation, if your mind goes blank, then you have something to fall back on. You know that when you walk in here, that you're prepared, and that unless something comes really out of left field, that you know what's going to happen. You are prepared to deal with whatever happens. And something comes out of left field, then maybe just admit it. Say, "Well, I've never experienced that before, but I will find out for you." that in itself is a demonstration of confidence that you're able to say that I don't know, but I'll find out for you. So, what are some of the benefits of practicing? Well, it makes make sure you cover all your intended points because, as we said before, your intended points will change for every presentation. And so when you practice those, you cover those, you remember which ones you need to get across this particular time. You may have some that come up every presentation, but some that are specific for this particular prospect. Practice certainly helps you relax and be more confident because you have that understanding, that built-in understanding that you can handle whatever comes up. And you practice using AV correctly, and it's hard. Sometimes we don't know the situation in which you will be giving your presentation, so you're not really sure where the flip chart will be, but you know that you don't want to turn your back to the audience, so you know that you can practice using it while you're writing on it, while you're actually facing the audience. You can certainly turn your head, but you still have your body address the audience, so you want to use that correctly. It helps you build your enthusiasm, your passion for what you're doing. And that helps when you're using your body language strategically. And the same thing, you're emphasizing your enthusiasm. And I know you can't see me here, but maybe you can hear it in my voice how I'm gesturing. I'm getting excited about this because it's something that I have that passion to help you make a good sales presentation. So that body language you're using that strategically. That could be how you sit, how you stand, or how you move around. Now you want to coordinate your voice and all this movement. So the more you practice, the more it'll seem spontaneous, the more it'll seem flowing when you're moving around, and you adjust your voice to make it strategic. And we'll talk momentarily about how to do that. And again, if your mind goes blank, it gives you that understanding, of confidence that you can come back with something that you can talk about until your mind does not go it's no longer blank until you get something written on it. And certainly that helps you anticipate those questions and think about some of the wacko ones that could come up, and at least you won't be totally floored when it in fact does come up. Practice helps you be interactive. It helps you get involvement. You're asking the right questions, and you're nodding your head. You're demonstrating the fact that you're listening when the prospect is talking. You have to let them know with your gestures that in fact you are listening, whether it's the eyebrows up and the shaking, nodding the head in agreement, or perhaps shaking your head in disagreement. That if they're talking about how bad your book is, nobody's going to do that. You're dealing with, most cases, we're dealing with professionals here, people who are business people that are not looking to put you down. All they want to do is make the best decision for their company. Practice keeps you on track so that you don't go off on a tangent, particularly if some people bring you off on that tangent. They may start talking about, well, here's what I did years ago in a different company that was totally had nothing to do with what you're talking about. So you have to be able to try to bring them back. And getting off to a good start is really important because it could have impact all the rest of your presentation. I remember one time I was just in a room that was really hot, and I was doing a presentation, and I just started dripping sweat. I just lost it. I didn't lose it. I mean, I did the presentation, but I did not get off to a good start. So it's something we'll talk about later, how you can avoid that too. Eliminating filler words. These are the once I go to the next slide. See, you hear that, the ahs and the ums, and those are words that are the filler words that when you don't know what you're going to say, you're fumbling around for something to say, and you have the ahs and the ums. Remember, my first radio show was live, and I asked my kids to record it so I could hear what it sounded like on the air. And I got home, and they were rolling on the floor laughing, and I listened to this tape. It was a 30-minute interview, and I said these non-words 163 times in 30 minutes, and I know that because they counted. So I just practiced. I practiced and practiced until I was able to talk without using a lot of ahs and ums, and hopefully that's what I'm doing now. But it gives you that situational flexibility too, where you can you respond differently. If you arrive at the situation and at the office to give your presentation, and your ally says, "Hey, my boss has got to catch a plane, so you only have 15 minutes instead of a half hour. So just give it your best shot." Well, you've got your practice. You know the three major points you want to bring up, so maybe you eliminate number two, and just go with one and three because they're the most important, and you get those across in 15 minutes. And lead into a trial close. You want to do that without creating tension. So it's just a smooth transition from your presentation into the summary, and then you say, "Okay, let's get started." And it's not something. Well, here's the end of my presentation. Now I'm going to ask you for the order. You don't say that obviously, but sometimes it may come across like that. So the more you practice, the more it becomes just a fluid interaction where it's just like a logical next step. You just talked about what you can do. Now, next step is we get started. How to practice. And I'm really focusing a lot on practice because this is a major part of a good sales presentation. That practice under the actual conditions, whether you know you'll be sitting, maybe doing a presentation to one person, you're not going to be using a lot of AV, maybe just handouts. But so you sit down and you practice leaning forward when you're doing your present. You're making your eye contact to make your points, and lean back when you ask a question, so the person can speak without being maybe intimidated by you leaning right over them. If I know I'll be standing in front of an audience, I will actually stand up when I'm doing my practicing. So, or sitting in a chair if you're doing across the desk. When I'm standing in that, I'll have a script in large type, not every word, because again, I don't want to memorize a script, but I have some major points in large type, and so I practice giving those. And then at the last point, you can see reducing the script to key words. That as I get better and better and better at practicing this particular presentation, then I can just put those three key words there, the main points, and maybe a sub point on each, and that's all I need. I can visualize that when I'm in my presentation, so things it helps me again with my mind. If my mind goes blank, I can just remember those key words. And try different things. It's fun to try different timing and different gestures. It's what makes you feel more comfortable. If something really makes you feel uncomfortable, well, don't do it. And particularly when I'm going back to present to a group the same group the second time, this could even be like a college class. I teach college as an adjunct in the local college, and I know what the students look like, so I'll close my eyes when I'm practicing a class lecture, and I see where the students are sitting, and it just makes things that much easier. Then that I can when I'm actually in the situation, I don't close my eyes, obviously, but I'm contacting the people that I just practice with, and it makes I feel more comfortable. Practice answering the questions, objectives. Doing the dress rehearsal is good. One time I got a new sport coat for a major presentation, and it didn't require a suit, so I felt a little more comfortable in a sport coat. So I bought a sport coat, and I did the dress rehearsal. And as I was walking out, I noticed that it still had the tag on the sleeve was sewn in the sleeve. So I had to. Good thing I had practice with that, so I cut that off. So before I did it in front of my prospect. Do you have two people in your presentation? Well, have both of you practice together so you can trade off each other's comments, and you know when you're going to hand off the presentation to the other person. And recording the practices can be good. It can help you find out if you are using the ahs and ums, and if you're speaking with the right volume. And then, as I said before, reducing the script to your key words. So the idea is you don't practice until you get it right. You practice until you can't get it wrong. That's what's really going to make your presentation go better. You're more confident and more likely to get the order. And one last thing in the preparation is that create what I call a pitch pack. It's something that you bring with you. You have one of these. It could be just a folder. You get it at Staples, just a folder with a little slot in there for your business card. You have maybe a couple pages. Don't make two-sided ones. Have all one-sided pages. One would just be a fact sheet about your book, and not just facts, the number of pages and for the size of it, but information about the content. So you do want to certainly have the facts about it, but have more of a description of the benefits, and talk about the author, talk about the publisher, give some credibility to your experience and why you're the person to be the expert on this particular topic. Have a one-page summary of your proposal. Your proposal shouldn't be more than 2 or 3 pages in total, and you have that in this folder. But you don't want to hand it out because they'll go right to the bottom line and say, "Well, how much is this going to cost me?" You want to be able to make sure you create some value before you give that dollar amount. If I say, I've got this ballpoint pen sharpener, it's only $2. How many do you want? Well, I hadn't given no value for it, and so I was going to buy it. So, well, then you drop the price to $1. How many do you want now? Well, they don't want it. So the idea is that it doesn't matter how low your price is if you keep going low. That they have to create the value first. Have an order form in there that just one of these that you have with you. You don't want to put in one in each one of the packets, but have one that you have. And certain areas are blank. The price is blank. The terms are blank. The order date is blank. The quantity is blank, and you fill that in as you're going along, which can be a really good presentation technique. Is let's say we need these books by next in 3 months from today. So then you write the date on your order form, and we need 6,000 books. Okay, you write that in that on the order form. So you're completing that as you're going through it. They don't really feel intimidated or creating any tension because all they see you do is writing some notes down. And I always have an autographed copy of the book for each person, autographed to that individual. And it goes with that folder. And I hand one out to each person. And we just go through the summary of the proposal in the presentation. So on the content, what are you going to say? And what are the words that you're going to use? And what I present are the 7 C's of good content. One, you want to be creative. That you have something that catches attention, something like a startling question, but something that's appropriate to your presentation. You may say, I've got an idea that can replace your coffee mugs as a premium at your trade show events. So it's something that will eliminate storage, eliminate transportation costs, eliminate breakage. And here's how this ebook can help you have a unique premium at the trade show. But it's got to be credible. Then here's how it works. Here's how you can do that. And convincing, maybe have some graphs and some charts showing how others have done it in the past. And then the complete is working with something that is complete to the time that you have. You may only have 15 minutes, so you have to have a complete attention getting factor, your X number of points, and your closing statement in that 15 minutes or 10 minutes or 1 hour, or how much time that you have available. Probably never going to get an hour, but half hour would be reasonable. Have it current, like that information I had when I went to Albany, and that as I was the noon expert, that I had talked about today's events. Make it clear. Don't use big words, and don't use words that are just for like a publisher would know. We don't want to say, well, here are these French flaps we can have on this book that help make it better. Well, they probably don't know what French flaps are, so they have to be clear and concise. Make every word count, particularly if you're in a 15-minute presentation. You've got to make every word count. So let's look at making the presentation. That here you were in the position of now you're on site and you're making the presentation. So you may want to deal with nervousness certainly. That practice is going to help a lot. The stress for success, I call it. That it's good to have a little bit of tension. That when I played racquetball, if my racket was not to the right tension, then I didn't play as well, or the ball didn't go where I wanted it to. So you have to have the tension adjusted. So it was never missing. If you have no tension on a tennis racket or a racquetball racket, then you just can't hit the ball properly. So you don't want to dwell on negatives. You don't want to put pressure on yourself by thinking, I've got to get this sale, otherwise I won't be able to make my car payment this month or something. That you've got to be able to, don't put that pressure on yourself. Just relax and know that you have other prospects in the wings, that if something doesn't go right here, then you always have another prospect. That's why in the initial chart that I showed you about the process, that there's a lot of prospecting that went on both in the retail and non-retail sectors. So people can reduce your nervousness because the other person can always handle it if you forget something, if your mind goes blank. We talked about jokes and having a handkerchief nearby. It's not so bad if you start sweating, as long as you can be able to work with it, or to have a handkerchief nearby. And that makes you feel a little bit better too, that once you wipe the brow off, then maybe you stop sweating because you handled it properly. And always smile and arrive early, just because that's important to arrive early. That the audience may change, the location that might change. That your ally says, "Well, the boss is gone today," so that you're talking with his assistant or her assistant. So that's you have to be flexible, and again, to that. The location may change. That the boss can't be here today, so let's just go in my office. And so your PowerPoint presentation is no longer going to work. So you've got to be able to have some handouts or go through your pitch pack with the person. The allocated time might change. We talked about some of these things. The AV problems. I remember one time doing a presentation to the president of Simon and Schuster, and my business partner and I were driving there. They're in New York City, and we drove in and hit this major traffic jam, and we had to call him from the car and say we'll be late. And this is the president of Simon and Schuster. we're making late to a meeting, but then we got there and within a reasonable amount of time, 15 minutes late. But then we couldn't get the PowerPoint program to work, and because we had they didn't have internet connection. We had to demonstrate some things, so it just caused a little bit of a problem. So had we arrived early, we could have handled those. You become familiar with the surroundings. If you're having coffee and whatever there, make sure that's there and out, and that everything is. The coffee cups are there, and the cream and the whatever, the sugar and the bagels, whatever that you have. I mean, adjusting the seating. I don't mean that you're moving all the chairs around, but I do mean that I was in one meeting and there were 3 chairs behind a table with their backs to a window, and I was facing. There's one seat facing the 3 with the sun right in my eyes. So what I did, I just closed the blinds, and I was able to. I didn't have to squint the whole time during my presentation. That it may turn down the temperature if you have the ability to do so. And then when people arrive, usually your ally will be with you. He or she will bring you into the room and where you're setting up, and when he'll or she will introduce you to the people as they come in. Here's my boss. She is the marketing manager. Here's our purchasing agent, and so you get the people's names, and just remember their names so you can address them during the presentation too. So let's look at delivering your content now. That vocally and visually, you have your words you want to deliver. Now, how are you going to actually present those? And this is a really important part. I know I stressed the preparation a lot on this presentation, but that's where everything else depends on that, on the practice, on the way you organize all these things. This vocal and visual communication delivery here, these are things that you can practice and should be aware of before you actually get in the room. What I do when I'm doing on the telephone or when I call somebody a prospect, I've got their website on my computer. I'm looking at that and going through it. And then I have the word voices written down on a card that I keep with me for all my presentations. And when I'm doing a in-person presentation, I write the word voices on the top of the page, because that reminds me to control my volume. If I'm talking on the phone, to keep the mouthpiece right in front of me, or if I'm talking to one person, I'm not going to shout and talk about across the room, but I have to raise my voice a little bit if I'm going to talk to a larger group. And if you're at the front of the end of a conference table and you're talking to people, particularly if you're looking to the left and looking to the right while you're talking, if you're looking to the left, and people on the right won't be able to hear you, and vice versa. So you've got to project that volume without sounding like you're aggravated. Always talk in the other person's perspective. So the O is other's perspective. Here's what it can do for you. Here's how your situation can improve. Here's how the absentee of your employees will be reduced. Or here's how your membership of your association can increase. Here's how your students can benefit with this content. The inflection of adding some accent to your words. They don't want to come across as a monotone, talking at the same rate, the same level of speech at the same time, the same volume. That just gets boring, and people are not going to listen to you. So you have to come up with that inflection, particularly if you're on a telephone. If you're in a large group, then you've got to come up with that inflection where if you have a real major point, you want to make sure people recognize you. You want to make sure that they understand. You want to make sure they take on with them. Then you add that inflection when you say that here's what it is, so that they remember that this is an important point. having the confidence that you can deliver this in a proper way. That's based upon your practice, your experience, and what your knowledge of your product and what you're doing. But your confidence certainly is easily identifiable. People can tell if you're confident or not. It doesn't have to be a deep voice, but if you have a ready answer to a question or to an objection or you're able to demonstrate something if they have a question, then that shows your confidence in what you're talking about. Enunciation is saying each word properly, which somewhat is a function of speed. I'm from New York originally, New Jersey, and I tend to talk a little bit too fast, but that impacts my enunciation. So I always try to slow down when I'm talking. It's okay to talk a little bit more faster as you're going over some preliminary information. But then when you really want to make a point stand out, you really want to make sure that they remember what you said and take that home with them. You slow down and make that point with a little bit more inflection, and then you can start off and talk a little bit faster and to go on to the next point. But as you adjust that speed and the volume and the inflection, then you're coming across in a much better way. So just think of that acronym VOICES, and that I think can help you in your presentations. Getting everyone involved is really important, and because that helps you support what you're saying and reinforcing. If somebody in the audience says, "Well, that's a good point, Brian. I'm glad you brought that up," then you've got that reinforcement, and you could also reinforce them. Somebody makes a point, and you support that and reinforce that. Well, that's really good. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a major. I want to get to that next, but let's talk about that now, because that flexibility that you have enables you to adjust your presentation points so that you don't say, well, okay, that's a good point. We'll talk about it later, because then that can reduce the passion that person had. Creating a vision together, that once you can hear it, the comments go from, well, about your book and about, if you do this correctly, then if you do that correctly, then it might work. Once they start talking about when we get this started, when we get this campaign started in the Northwest, they go from your book to us, to together. That is a major change in the whole presentation. At that point, you can feel pretty confident that you can get an order. Certainly have to work out the terms of it. Get them to discover your solution. The more that you can get them involved with it, so that they're coming up with these ideas. What if we do this together? How about that? Then you get them to discover your solution. You get them to come up with ideas so that they are implementing what you meant to have them implemented. Because if you just tell them how great your book is and all the great things you can do for them, they may not, in fact, believe you, because they realize that you're not the most objective person in the room. There's a quote that Brian Tracy said, that those convinced against their will are of the same opinion still. That means that if you're telling them what they need to know about your book, then it doesn't mean that they're convinced about it. It means that they are listening to you. But if you can help them come up with a solution on their own, then they're more likely to do that. And this other guru, Brian Judd, said those convinced by what they say will sell themselves and stay that way. That, I think, is really important. That once they come up with the idea, they become part of the solution. They become part of the recommendation, and then that makes your sale that much easier. So, getting involved is asking questions. Certainly, this is a question I use a lot. If you could wave your magic wand, what would make the best sales presentation, or the best sales campaign, or the best product, how would the perfect sales campaign go? Marketing campaign, or HR campaign, whatever that may be. Or what if we did this? That starts to get, once you start using the we word, then that gets them involved with it too. Where they may say, where would place your logo on the cover? You're asking them. You don't say we can place your logo here. You say where would you place it? So then it's no longer now will we place the order. It's we'll place the order, but where are we going to put our logo? So there are different types of questions. We want to start off basically with a fact-finding questions. Have you ever used a book as a promotional item before? Well, no, or a short answer. Then you go, the open-ended is, well, what do you use? How do you use that? Have you ever thought about using a book? What here, have you ever thought about some of the benefits of using a book? And they say, no, we haven't. Then you go into your list of the benefits. So you start off with that closed question to direct the conversation, to get commitment, and also to check on your understanding. If you make your point, you can say, does that come across right? Did I explain that to your satisfaction? And they say, well, not really. I still don't understand what you mean by that. See, if you had just gone on to the next point, then they would have been sitting there wondering what you're talking about. You don't want to use multiple choice questions. Should we start next week, next month, next quarter? Then you want to make a recommendation. Let's start next week. Well, we can't do it next week. We have some budget talks on Thursday, so let's get back together again in 10 days, something like that. But here that you're taking the initiative, the lead, and you're not making alternative choice questions about that. Well, do you want 10,000 or you want 20,000 books? Well, they're thinking, well, they only want to start off with 5,000. So you want to be able to don't offer the alternatives. Just make your recommendation and let them discuss whether they will go with that or not. It's good to tell stories, not long stories as I mentioned before, but the more that you can tell a short, simple story that's relevant to what you're talking about. You're making your product, the book, the hero, and you want to get people involved emotionally. So they're thinking, well, yeah, I can understand that, particularly if it's something that maybe was a situation you had before. When I talked about sweating in front of the audience, that maybe you were thinking, well, that's happened to me one time too. So that gets people involved with it. So the simple formula is, what it used to be, what happened, and what it's like now. What it used to be is perhaps their last campaign, and what happened, well, this went wrong, and here's what we can do now to make it better. So that's the information about your story. Some tips for telling stories. Well, talk about the actual experiences, and that maybe case histories, and your book was the hero in every one of those. And it's not, you don't want to make it too long, but you do want to make it relevant to what you're saying. If you practice a lot of different presentations, then you can appear spontaneous. That in fact that you bring these up, that it appears like, wow, I just thought of this. But it's like the arrows in your quiver, that each one is a relevant story, and you know which one to pull out and use at any particular point. But as long as you know what these examples or stories are, then they have that, you can use that payoff at a particular time. And it also gets the prospects involved emotionally, or they're may thinking, well, yeah, I can understand how that happened. Or you can ask them, has that ever happened to you? And certainly you want to be optimistic and have a positive ending with your book as the hero. And you want to show, don't tell, like as I talked before, that you want to get interest quickly with your startling statement or your attention-getting statement. You want to connect with people to get them to trust you, to sympathize with you, and create some suspense, not tension, but suspense, so that your product will eliminate that tension, eliminate that suspense, and come up with the solution. Getting interactive questions to get the person involved, so they're not thinking about the calls they've got to make as soon as this situation, your presentation is over. They're thinking about what you're saying, and then you want to end with action. Just as a quick example here, that when I'm in a presentation, I've started off some of these presentations with a way to try to get interest quickly. I started my career in publishing when I was laid off my job on November 9th, 1990 at 10:37 a.m. And that I was in the corporate world. I knew I didn't want to go back into the corporation. So this is where you get interest by saying that. So you connect with them. I wanted to I thought I'd try writing a book, and how hard could it be to write a book? And so that's a way to connect with them. And then the suspense is, I started selling books through bookstores, and I realized that distribution discounts and returns, and I thought I've got to find a better way to sell this. How can I do that? So you have some interactive questions. And I did some research. I found out there are 8 million. My book is about how to get a job. I don't know if I said that. There are 8 million people unemployed, and 6 million people wanted a book about jobs, about resumes and cover letters and interviewing. There's 6 million of those. If you had the opportunity to hit this segment of 1 million, or the segment on the right with 1 million, or the segment 6 million, where would you start with? And they always say, well, I would go for the 6 million. And then you talk about how you went over here, the left-hand side of the million people who knew how to write a resume but had a bad attitude. So you wrote a book for that. And a million people over here who had a great attitude but didn't know where to send their resume. So you wrote a book about that. The idea is that you ended up selling 500,000 copies of the book, and you can do the same thing. And here are some ways why. So you have this information that you connected, you created some suspense, asked the interactive question, and ended with some kind of an action step. That was done with less than a minute. So and obviously it doesn't have to be. It could have been a little bit smoother, but you get the idea about how you can hit those points pretty quickly. Let's look at your visual presentation now. That you want to look at your gestures, practice your gestures, practice your posture and your facial expression, and the particularly your use of space. Are you going to stand up? Are you going to move around? Are you going to just stand? Are you going to sit down and move back and forth, or whatever it may be? But you're practicing these things. But your visual presentation is all these come together. That your gestures and postures and facial expression are changed as you're talking, and your space may depend upon the location, and the audio visual aids will look at how to do that. So your body language should reinforce your verbal delivery. You learned that during your practice, and your movements are appropriate. If you're standing, you're able to move around. If you're moving to the left, and you make your eye contact to the right, so those people are not left out of the presentation while you're moving to the left. And have your eye communication with them. You're reading cues from the audience. How is the audience reacting? You want to find out, are you coming across properly? And you may get this look where 3 out of the 4 people are on your side. Yeah, that's a good idea, Judd. I think that we can do that. But the one person kind of standing up there is, I'm not so sure, maybe a little bit skeptical. So you may have to say, no, Joe, you don't look like you really believe what I'm saying here. Is that true? You don't want to. No, that's not true. You don't want to put them on the spot and say, Joe, is there anything else I didn't take the blame for? Is there anything that I didn't talk about that was that you were thinking about, or that I addressed all your concerns properly? So you're taking the blame for it. Otherwise, you might get an audience like this that's no way. Or someone says, tell me more. I kind of know what you're talking about, but I need some more information. So you're reading their body language, and then you have to respond to that. So there's also the physical aspect. It depends on a number of people. Certainly, if it's one-on-one, if you're in an airport bar, it's going to be one-on-one. And it could be a conference room or an office. And if you're in a restaurant or in a hotel room or in a bar or on an airplane, it's just one-on-one. So your whole pitch will depend on that, and your certainly use of AV. Small office room, office setting, or a conference room, or more formal. So practice all these different situations so you're flexible and you know when and how to use that. Telephone presentations, well, you want to avoid that if possible, and use a landline. You avoid that because when you have a telephone presentation, you don't have the body language to see. You can't see how they're reacting, and they can't see yours. It becomes a vocal presentation. So use a landline, not a cell phone, just to have a better and more secure connection for the entire event. Remember your voices, and use a headset if you have the opportunity, because that eliminates extraneous noise, and it also things can sound more clear. Have your large type keywords in front of you. I do that in a presentation, a telephone presentation. So my mind definitely can't go blank because I've got it right in front of me. If you're talking with different people, I was in a conference call last week, and I had 2 other people on there, and I was able to recognize their voices, so I could say, okay, Scott, that I understand that. Oh, Jim, that's a good point. And if you use their names, it helps you come across a lot better. And then you can they can't see you, so you have to create these visual images. Also, let them know you're listening, and by making listening noises, that yeah, good point, right? Okay, yeah, sure. So not all at once, but just periodically, because if they say, are you still there? Then you've lost that connection. I like to stand up when I'm speaking because that It helps me have more enthusiasm. I can gesture when I'm talking, and it helps me come across hopefully with more passion in my voice. Unplug other phones, and so you don't have that in the background, that problem of phone ringing somewhere else, and smile. That comes across in your voice. Maybe you can hear me smiling now. That's something that, if you have that, if it's appropriate, you want to make that happen. Take notes so you can refer back to what people have said. Let the other disconnect first. Sometimes you may disconnect just as the person says, "Oh, wait, Brian, I've got one other question," and boom, you've already hung up. So I let them disconnect first just to make sure there is no question like that. Now, do you want to use AV or not? Well, if it will help the audience understand, yes, you do. Or if you help them remember what you're saying, those are the two times you want to use AV, or that will may dictate the type of AV that you use. Because if you just talk on the phone or just make an oral presentation, the retention is much less than if you have some visual along with what you're saying, because they both go together. If used properly, then you can reinforce what you're saying. So you want to use the AV to enhance and support what you're saying, not as a crutch, not to take the place of, but just to reinforce visually, because people remember visually what they see, as I just demonstrated. It depends on the location, which talked about, and the size of the audience. If you're talking to one person across the desk, you're not going to use a flip chart or a PowerPoint presentation, but you may have handouts. You may have certainly a copy of your book to talk about. And your practice, you've coordinated your audiovisual techniques with your words, so they reinforce what you're saying, not taking the place of it. And talk to the audience. Don't turn your back on the audience while you're writing on your flip chart. Then, or if you're projecting your PowerPoint presentation, you don't have to look up at the screen. You can just look at your computer that's right in front of you. Then reveal sequentially, because if you list all these things together, while I'm talking about enhancing and supporting your presentation, you're looking down at, what do you mean talk to the audience? So that helps you focus the attention on what you're talking about at the time. Some types of actual audio visual, maybe your actual sample of your book, or the PowerPoint presentation, photographs. These are all different things that you can, different types of AV. Flip charts, one I like a lot. If the audience, if the situation presents itself for that. For example, just in a conference room, for example, but in a keynote speech, you probably would not use a flip chart. Having handouts, whiteboard, blackboard. So these are all things that you can use as types of AV aids. Again, if it's appropriate to your setting and to your audience. Using a flip chart or a chalkboard, that one, write large and legibly so people in the back of the room can see it. And or also when someone talks about or brings up a point, write that down, or write down your major points, your keywords that you want to make sure that people will remember. Don't use the bottom of the page because people in the back of the room may not be able to see it. And underline it or highlight. Bring different color markers with you, so you can highlight the major points. Maybe circle it in a different color, or actually write it in a different color, or underline it. What I do if I bring my own flip chart, which I do, I have a desktop and a stand that I can put the A-frame I can put it on. But I make little notes in pencil that the audience can't see, but I'm up there and writing on there, so I can see what I'm supposed to be writing. So I've got that ability to understand or to have the information I need to write next. And then record the audience comments. But if someone in the audience says, that's a good point, well, here's what we can do in addition. So you write that in red, and so when you do your summary, you can say, well, Ms. Jones said that we could do this, and you point to it on your flip chart that when you're doing your summary. So using your PowerPoints, you can use sound to get attention. That's if you use it properly and use something that you can. Just then, I was hoping that would demonstrate how that can get attention. And use phrases. Don't put entire sentences on there. Some people will put a sentence on there and then they read the whole thing, and you lose it. People aren't going to remember a sentence, but they may remember the one phrase that you wrote up there, particularly if you repeat that. Use a font that's easy to read. Something like I use Arial. You can see the difference there, what Arial versus whatever this font is. Have a title for each visual, and use simple tables and charts. Don't have something that's very intricate. Like pie charts can be less demonstrative than something like this type of a chart, which you can show that the purple is the increase in revenue or sales that we can experience in this campaign. Benefits of using visual aids certainly enhances your message, that so that it makes people remember it more. That it can customize your message to the individual that in company, because you may have their logo on every page. I've done that before. Use their logo instead of dot points, having their logo there. Wherever you can use to customize it to their company, then it comes across as you're made this presentation just for them. It also makes your comments more memorable because they can remember what they see more than what they hear. And also the stories help them remember too. So if you can combine a story with a visual aid, it can be much more memorable for them. It helps the audience be more attentive, particularly that if you're using the sound, that it gets their attention. They don't expect that. The mobility could be you can take that flip chart to a different room if you need to. I've been in some rooms, some presentations where I did the presentation and they said, well, that's really great. Now we need to bring it over to HR so they can see what we're talking about. So you grab your flip chart or your laptop and bring it there. We always have, when you bring your laptop, have your presentation on a USB also in case there's a problem that you need to plug into their computers. Certainly the eye communication is important, that you don't turn your back on the audience when you're writing on your flip chart, and have some variety. Maybe have you have your pitch pack to hand out with your book, and then you have a flip chart and you have other handouts you want to give along and so give out. So it's something you vary your AV as much as you vary your content. So then you conclude your presentation by reviewing what you talked about, summarizing the major points, particularly those that the people in the audience brought up, and then you offer your trial close. Have your order form all filled out, so all you need is for them to okay it. And don't have them sign this contract. People don't want to sign contract, but they want, if you okay this agreement, we'll get started next week. And then know your options. Before you go into that, part of your preparation should be knowing the approximate price at 5,000 books or 10,000 books or 20,000 books. Because go to your printer and ask the printer what the printing costs would be at those quantities. Then if they say, well, no, I like what you're saying, but I need some more information, or I'm not sure about the terms, then you need to go into your negotiation, which is another class of book selling university. Book marketing is as simple as pie. If you prepare, implement, then evaluate. So I've gone through all the preparation. Now, how are you going to evaluate your performance? Well, before the presentation, did you prepare a written script? And did you learn about the buyer's criteria? Did you include that in your script? And do you address all those in your script? Did you practice? Do you prepare notes that were easy to read and use and anticipate these things? All things we talked about in the preparation. Did you in fact do that? So you go through the checklist. If something went wrong in your presentation, this can help you find out where that error was and how you can change it to make it better next time. And during the presentation, did you focus on the benefits? Did you use people's names and vary your voices? That's the more that you can do that I think can help you on the phone or in personal presentations more than almost any other vocal technique that you can use. And did you transfer your passion, use it effectively, and use visual aids? You can read these things that just the sooner after your presentation you can go through this checklist. I think the more relevant it will be, the more likely you are to remember it, and the more likely you are to make the changes the next time. So you can see this as a process. Just doing a sales presentation is not something you'll be an expert on it initially, but it's a process. You get better and better. That's why I think you should practice on it, not on your top prospects right away. That if you're thinking about this as a TV or radio show, don't try to get on the top radio show or top TV show right away. Go on good morning, Dubuque, and practice these different things before you try to get on a Today Show or whatever. So evaluation is very important before, during, and after your presentation. And sending thank you notes to people, I think is something that I do all the time, whether it's an email or a actual written letter. That I think it's important to make that happen. So thank you for attending this course on how to make a persuasive sales presentation. If you need any more information, please give me a call or email and we can talk further. I wish you great success in your sales efforts.